you, Olympia. Thank you, band. And thank you, David. Yeah. You are so great. Before we go there, I want to talk to you a little, just for a moment, about Maya Angelou, because I have a couple of things to add to that. Maya Angelou is the Science of Mind Spiritual Hero of the Year this year. Yeah. I called our publisher, David Goldberg, and said, let's start a trend having the Spiritual Hero of the Year make transition. I met her once. Didn't actually meet her. I saw her once. She was leaving the Washington Reagan Airport as I was going in. And she was walking with an entourage, but she was 2 or 3 steps ahead of all those guys. And she was walking with her head held so high and a purse clutched under her arm with such intention she moved in. The only word I could, in that moment, imagine to describe her was regal. You know, she really knew how to live. That woman was amazing. So thank you for sharing that with us. That was wonderful. What I want to talk about today moves a little bit out of the norm for Science of Mind. The Science of Mind, that name that we use for our teaching, Ernest Holmes meant by the word mind, God. Mind equals God. And for some who couldn't quite get that, he also called it the science of mind and spirit. But what I want to talk about today, I would describe more as the science of being, and how we apply this to our lives. Because there's some structure here, there's some science around how we function as human beings. And one area has to do with this universal question. How do you feel? And the answers that come normally from that, well, the universal answer is fine. Well, you come to a place like this, it's great, it's wonderful, it's fantastic, you know, and it still falls into that, putting a quality on it and being done with it. I have this deep desire in my life to have someone someday, not now, but sometime, say to me, how do you feel? And for me to say, okay, well, I experienced something. And then when I experience that, I go into my subjective mind and I consider all the memories I've ever had, and what I do is I identify that experience as being a certain thing. Then I take that experience and I apply an emotional value to it. And with that emotional value, I feel something about that, and then I have a whole human experience. That's how I feel. There's also 2 parts to this that I want to clear up right away. We'll go to the next slide. If someone, oh, isn't that sweet? You got it? It just happened. It takes just a few seconds to actually have that experience and have it go all the way to, oh. Now most everybody in the room went, oh, because we like puppies, right? Everybody except the person that had several litters to take care of and go, oh, they poop and they stink and you got to take them out, and you know, that person had a different memory to filter to go through and had a different experience than many of us. But most of us go to the, ah. That's the kind of the way emotions occur in us. They occur instantaneously at that moment of having an experience. Yet it is a process. It is a process. Okay, 2 different ways that we deal with this question. The first one is, how do you feel? That's a physical question most of the time. How do you feel? Is usually the question that follows you having been healed. How do you feel now? You know, that's usually physical. If the question is more like, how do you feel about? That's on the next slide. There it is. That's an emotional question. That's asking you to talk about how you feel about a certain thing, because your attention is put on a certain thing, like the puppies, right? So that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to talk about what the science is of feeling, the science of being, and how that works. It's not really in the stuff that Holmes wrote about. There's not much about that. The idea is you're supposed to feel good. And Barbara talked recently about happiness and pointed out that Holmes his nickname was Happy. So his place to be was happy. And he spent a lot of time there. And that's good. And I think we should all spend a lot of time at happy. But let's look at how this works. And I'll run through the beginning of this pretty quickly because it starts off a little tough. But there's this thing that I learned outside of the science of mind called the emotional tone scale. If you listen to Abraham at all, you'll hear that idea come up, but I heard it before Abraham was around. and I'm bringing you an abbreviated version of the tone scale, the emotional tone scale, to look at today, because I want you to be aware of your emotional state. Now, I know yours is above the average norm of people in the world, but let's look at where it is that we can go in a scale from 0 to 40. And here's the scale. Can y'all read that in the back? No, you can't. That's good, because we're going to go through one at a time. Those of you up front, don't get too lost in there. But we're going to start with 0, because 0 is a great place to begin this process. 0 is death. Yeah. Meaning, if your body, you're not in your body's just kind of laying there, there's no reason to feel anything in that body, right? So we don't do it. That's your baseline. 0, death. Got it? Okay, moving up from there, we come to apathy. And on a 40-point scale, it's 0.05. Look how close apathy is to death. Apathy. What is apathy? I don't care. I just don't care. It's the way the world goes to pot, is when we just don't care about anything. Young people, they have apathy about cutting the grass. They don't care how long the grass is. But if you want to go to a movie or the mall, oh yeah, they're out of apathy in a heartbeat. The apathy is that place that is so slow. And that what we're dealing with here is vibration. Because emotions are energy. And when they're low, they are slow. And when they're moving slow, they're heavy. So apathy is, I don't care. What a hard place to be. Okay, we're going to move from that to lovely guilt. Guilt is self-imposed, the burden of the world. Guilt is, if you've ever heard me talk about the primal sins that we want to avoid in a philosophy that doesn't have sin, guilt's one of them. It's the idea that we feel like we've done something wrong. So the burden of the world is on us. If we feel terrible, it's just we burden ourselves, and it's a very, very heavy energy. It's all on a 40-point scale, 0.2. Okay? Got guilt? Moving on, grief. Now, grief is where at least I can clearly identify some value. Because if we lose someone close to us in our lives, we grieve that loss. If we lose a job, our home, or whatever, if there's a major loss in our lives, there's something that we have become familiar with and certainly relate to, when it's gone, we feel grief. Why do we feel grief? Because we have to fill our emotional body with something to fill that void. So we grieve, and it's a heavy energy, and it burdens us. But it has its point and its value. There's value in feeling grief. And from that place of grief, we can reestablish ourselves. But of course, you've heard of people that have grieved the loss of someone in their lives for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And what that's about is that we can get so familiar with an emotional state that we stay in it. It's a comfort zone. It's not pleasant. We don't enjoy it, but we stay there because we know it. And so people that grieve the loss, especially of a child, many of them hold in that place. It isn't healthy. It isn't helpful, but it's what some people do. They can't quite resolve what happened, so they end up staying there for a long period of time. It's a tough place to get out of, too. But as you can see, it's only half a point on the 40-point scale. The next one up is fear. Oh, we got all the way to 1 on a 40-point scale. Fear, a very common, a very important emotion to recognize. When we have fear, what's going on is we have a conflict with something in the future. We're never afraid of what's happening right now. And most of you have heard it if you've taken classes with me. Here's my main example. Suppose I had a box up here with a rattlesnake in it, and I dumped it out on the floor right in front of Celeste. What would Celeste be experiencing? Fear. What would she be experiencing fear about? Being bitten by the snake, but she hasn't been bitten by the snake yet. She fears it. That's a logical thing to feel, right? Now suppose Celeste was bitten by the snake. Would she fear being bitten by the snake anymore? No, she'd be afraid about dying, going down to 0, It's always something in the future. No, that's not true. I have things in my past I have fear about. No, you don't. You have fear about someone in the future finding out about the things in your past. It's all about the future. Fear is futuring. So what you do when you get to 1 is you're holding this heavy energy that something's going to happen. Now here's the thing about all emotional states. You have an experience, you attach it to emotion, and what you're doing there is you're actually applying the law of attraction. You're setting up a neon sign to bring that thing to you. So when you're afraid, you're calling that thing you're afraid of into your life. How's that going to work for you? Not so good. At least at this point. At this point, that's not the place you want to go. You want to move beyond the fear. Now, you know people that have been in a fearful state, afraid their partner's going to leave them, afraid they're going to lose their job, afraid that something is just going to go wrong in their lives, and they obsess on it and they hold on to it. And all it does is it works them, and eventually they get what they were afraid of. I heard of a guy once that kept telling his doctor he had cancer, and they kept checking him. He says, "You're fine." "No, I have cancer." You know, his doctor would check him, "No, you're fine." And after about 20 years, he went to the doctor, and the guy said, "You have a tumor, it's a cancerous tumor." He said, "I knew it." It took him 20 years to create it, but he did. So when you go into fear, you don't have to say a word. What you have to do is think that and apply the emotion of fear, and you are calling that into your life. Be aware of that. Up from fear, we have this lovely thing called covert hostility. That's when you're smiling at someone and thinking you hate their guts. Because you really don't like the person, but you're gonna, so what the deal is there is that you have these feelings, but you suppress them. You hold them down. That's why it's such a heavy energy. It's heavier than the next two that really is what it's about, but it's you holding it down so that you don't have to expose it to anyone. So you act really nice and appropriate with someone, but you don't feel that way, really. Covert hostility. Up from that, you get resentment. Now, I don't want to get too heavy here. And the idea of resentment is clearly that someone has done something and you don't agree, and you make them wrong, and you spend all your time making them wrong, and what are you going to get? You're going to get being in a state that's 1.3 on the emotional scale. Who wants to stay there? It's another place where you can get real comfortable in your misery. Resenting people, feeling badly about people for what they've done or what they've got. It really doesn't matter. Anytime that you find fault in another person, there's a level of resentment there. But then, of course, there's the historically famous emotional state that's up from there, hate. They hate you. See the difference between that and covert hostility? At least you're being honest. That's why it's a lighter energy than covert hostility. Resentment and covert hostility you can kind of keep to yourself. You know, let just eat on you. But once you're in a hate, you want to spread it around. Hate you. Barbara actually said hate today. She was talking about her allergies. Yeah. I'm not sure that's the way to get rid of the allergies, though. Are you in the room, Barbara?
I'm here.
I thought so. Okay. Hate is actually a heavier energy than the one above it, anger. But that's when you're just blowing off steam. You're just angry and upset. You know what is interesting to me about anger is that most people who go through some kind of loss down in grief, they're stuck in grief, they're feeling this terrible loss, but you start seeing them change, and the first thing you see them clearly do is get angry. They get angry because they lost this person in their life, or they lost their home, or they lost something important to them. They get angry. And when you see somebody do that, encourage them. They're getting better. They're coming up. They've gone all the way from grief at 0.5 all the way up to anger at 1.5 on a 40 scale. Doesn't sound like much, but it's important. They're headed in the right direction. So encourage that anger for a while. And then you got to let go of it, because anger is a tool that my teacher in Australia, my first spiritual teacher, taught me how to use. He said, anger will stop. The purpose of anger is to stop something. Fortunately, that means that when you're experiencing anger, you're stopping everything else to be angry. But here's an example of how anger is used to stop. You play in the front yard with your child. You throw the ball back and forth, and the ball bounces away and starts into the street. The child's running off to get the ball, and here comes a car down the street. Honey, stop, stop. Honey, stop. You're running. Stop! And they do. Because you used anger to get them to stop. It really does work that way. And what my teacher taught me was that if I really want to stop somebody, get up close to them and use that kind of energy on them, and whatever they're doing, they'll stop. Now, of course, there's a price to pay for that, because chances are that they're going to get angry back at me to stop me from being angry at them. So it's a bit of a slippery slope, but it does have its purpose. Anger really does. So if you see someone who's coming up from grief, it's okay that they're angry. If you are angry, just realize what you're doing is stopping yourself. Anger and stop are the same thing. And it's hard to stay angry. You have to really work at it. Some people do. Some people make a living at it. But I want you to know that it has its place if you use it correctly, and you recognize that there's always repercussions for being in a state of anger. Coming up from anger is pain. Now, that could be physical pain or it could be emotional pain. Actually, they're the same thing. If you have a sensation of pain in your body, you have an emotional pain attached to it. It goes back to that same model that I presented you with at the beginning. You have a sense of pain in your body, and you're going to feel emotional pain around that. And what we call that emotional pain is suffering. And the definition of suffering is a pain that you don't know is going to stop. You're kind of stuck in this loop thinking you don't know that it has an ending. All you know is that it's pain, and you wish it would stop, and you don't know how to get there. So the pain you're feeling is called suffering. Pain is not in and of itself a bad thing. Pain is in your body is telling you that something is amiss, something isn't working. That often, in many situations, allows us to find a remedy or to work with that or to find a solution. And even in this situation, pain is simply telling you something is amiss in your life. If you're feeling pain, emotional pain around something, but you don't have to stay there. You never, ever, ever have to stay there. In fact, that's the beautiful thing about a scale as it slides. You can go anywhere on the scale you want, anytime you want. And I'm going to teach you how in a few minutes. But right now we're at pain. I want to go up to boredom. Boredom is a wonderful emotion to know. Boredom means I have interest. I have this interest, but I have nothing in my life right now to apply it to. There's nothing here going on that I find interesting. So I'm bored. That interesting? It's wonderful to know that you're that close to doing something that you're going to like when you're bored. All you need is something to direct that interest to, and suddenly the boredom will just vanish. It's that close, it's 2.5. Interest is 2.9. That's the next one. Whoa, you went the other way. The other way. There you go. All right. Interest. A wonderful emotion state. It means that you're focused on something and it's working for you. And your emotional state is uplifted. It's almost a point or 3 on a 40-point scale. Still sounds kind of low, but I'll explain how that works here in a minute. The idea of interest is that your life is working. There's something meaningful going on and you're paying attention. And that's a valuable place to be. Wonderful things happen from the place of interest. So if you're interested in something, stay there for a while. You'll have a good time. And if you're distracted away from something you're interested in, know how to go back there. You're productive when you're interested. You're doing something meaningful when you're interested. Let's go to the next one. Happy, happy, happy. God, you look at that kid's face, you get happy. You know? We talk about happy around here a lot. It's a wonderful place to be. It's a powerful place to be. Probably one of the reasons that I wouldn't hold it as the highest level of activity for me is from this scale, because it's at 3.5 on a 40-point scale. We haven't even gotten to 10% yet. How does that work? Well, but I'm happy. Happy is a great place to be. I've made peace with that completely. Barbara says the purpose of life is to be happy, and okay, I'll be at 3.5. I'm good with that. And everybody else in this room should be good with it too. But you can go further. You can actually go into enthusiasm And I like it when people tell me I'm enthusiastic. I like a thumbs up in life. I love having that high level of energy to put into this light, wonderful experience, to bring it to everything that I do, to be enthusiastic about my life. You see the difference between enthusiasm and happiness? It's a bump up. And it's a wonderful place. And you can sustain it. So far, everything that I've shown you, you can sustain all the time. You can stay in any of these as long as you want to. Some of them that are the lower, heavier, slower energies of emotions are not that wonderful to stay in, but you can stay there. Or you can stay all the way up to 4.0, to the 1/10 point on the scale. You can stay there all you want. This is the range from 1 to 4 that allows you to move at will anytime you want. Of course, there is something above that. There's exhilaration. Exhilaration is that experience of being on a roller coaster. Ah! It's wonderful, yay, in the moment. But how many times are you going to take that thing in a row? That ride on that roller coaster? And doing it with monks just seemed like the right thing to do. Exhilaration is a human emotional state. It's just one you can't maintain all the time. It will burn you out. Yeah, but you can do it every so often, and it is just so exciting and wonderful and just exhilarating, absolutely. So here we're at 8.0. We're at 20% of this emotional scale. And there's only one more thing on there, and it's serenity of beingness. Go ahead up there. No. You got to push the down button. You're kidding. Okay, well, we're learning. All right. Serenity of beingness. That's that epiphany, that a peak experience, that thing where life is transcendent. And it only happens for a moment or two. I've heard people talk about their peak experiences. It's like, don't try to drive when that's happening. Everything shifts. It happened for Holmes when he was speaking at a church in California. He said it was like the veil being drawn away, pulled away. It's a joyous, out-of-body type of thing. And you can have it, but not all the time. But that's where you get the oneness of life. So I hope for you that in your life, at some point, you will have that experience, that serenity of beingness. But the point of sharing, and we'll go to the next one. Thank you. The point of sharing this idea of feelings, to me, is so valuable because we can circumvent that formula that I started with, where you have some kind of experience, either external or internal, with either something that's physically happening or a memory. Your subjective mind doesn't know the difference. So you can close your eyes and I could take you anywhere, and you could have an emotional experience. And what many people will tell you is, have happy thoughts. And you can. But if your heart's broken, someone says, have happy thoughts, you want to slap them. You come all the way up to anger just to slap them, and then you go back into grief. But here's what we can know. We are always, without exception, in charge of our emotional state. We get to say how we feel. And all you actually have to do is teach yourself that, believe that, and you can go from anywhere on that scale to anywhere you want to go. I would say up to about the 8. You can move at will if you choose it. And I've done that enough to know how it's done. Now, the idea of taking one of these lower emotional states and using that and playing with that, sure, it can create some problems in your life. But you can always go to happy. You can always go to interested. You can always go to enthusiastic at any moment. If you think you can't, then you're caught in that idea that you are powerless in your life. And if there's anything that science of mind is about, is to teach you that that is not so, that you are all powerful in your life. That you are drawing to you exactly what you are creating in an emotional state. Something that Barbara has been saying in class that is just genius to me, is the idea that if you want to master your fate, you must first master your state, meaning your emotional state. What is going to come to you is exactly what you are feeling and knowing and seeing in your life. You create it at every step, in every way. So you can play wherever you want. I normally only teach this to my practitioner students, but I thought it was time for everybody to know. You're in charge of your emotional state. And if you tell one of your practitioner around here that you can't help it, you feel so sad, you feel so angry, and you can't help it, they're going to call you a liar because you are. You're lying to yourself. And they have my permission to call you a liar. To wake you up so that you see that you're creating your emotional experience from beginning to end every single day. And if you want to have the life that you claim to want, then you cannot have those heavy energies because they will bring you something else. Now, if someone in your life passes that you have a heart connection to, go feel some grief. Absolutely. But as soon as you've done that and you've put that grief in place, go back to something like happy or interested. Play a bigger game, a higher game, a lighter game, and then you will be living the life that you claim you want. I wish that for all of you. That's the point. That's why we do this, so that we can have that wonderful, rich life that calls to us. So, how do you feel? Yeah, that's it. You got it. I love you.